Good morning, attendees, and thank you for joining us today for our three-part virtual panel entitled Exploring Online Fraud and the Sale of Counterfeit Goods. TICC Council is the global trade federation representing the independent third-party testing, inspection, and certification industry, which brings together more than 90 member companies and organizations from around the world to speak with one voice. Its members provide services across a wide range of sectors, including consumer products, medical devices, food, and others. Through provision of these services, TICC Council members assure that not only regulatory requirements are met, but also the reliability, economic value, and sustainability are enhanced. The counterfeiting of TICC member marks and test reports is a growing issue, along with the increased sale of counterfeit goods and online fraud. Last week, the TICC Council held our first panel and welcomed speakers from RILA, AOAC, and Bureau Veritas to provide an introduction to the issue of online fraud and counterfeit goods. To view a recording of that panel, please visit the event page on the TICC Council website. You'll also find there a copy of our TICC Council white paper on counterfeiting, which highlights the effect this issue has had on the TICC industry, as well as our position paper on it, which includes recommendations on addressing the sale of counterfeit products on e-commerce platforms. Today will be the second of our three-part virtual panel series. Along with our esteemed panelists, we will be exploring the cost of online fraud and counterfeits. The TICC Council will be recording this session, and a copy of the recording will be posted in a few days on the TICC Council website. If you do happen to lose connection and are unable to re-enter the event, be assured that we will be notifying all registered guests when the recording becomes available online. In addition, the slides from today's session will be posted, and so please feel free to hold off on making screenshots, as you'll be able to review the full set of slides at a later date. Finally, we kindly ask that you use the Q&A function on the side of the screen to submit your questions. TICC Council staff will be reviewing them as we proceed and queuing questions for the Q&A portion of the event at the end of the session. While not all questions may be answered, we will do our best to include as many as we can as time allows. And with that, let us begin. Today, we are joined by Commissioner Baiocco from the Consumer Product Safety Commission, Kimberly Giannopoulos, Director in GAO's International Affairs and Trade Mission Team at the Government Accountability Office, and Jill Notini, VP of Communications at the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers. At this time, I'd like to welcome Dana Baiocco, Commissioner at the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Commissioner Baiocco joined the CPSC on June 1st, 2018. She was confirmed by the Senate on May 22nd, 2018. Commissioner Baiocco's appointment by President Donald Trump is for a 7-year term, retroactively beginning on October 27th, 2017. Commissioner Baiocco, welcome, and at this point, I'll turn it over to you.
To consumers being sent directly into their house is the single most devastating safety issue we have in front of us right now. So I actually, it was hard for me to figure out which panel I would fit best into, because I do have some things to talk about, on all three of the panels. So I jumped in the middle here, and I hope you don't mind that I wander from panel to panel in some of the topics. Look, there are so many organizations, we all know this, trying to attack this problem. Most of the organizations are using IRP or IPR or intellectual property rules and concepts and trademark laws and so forth. We don't need to get to that one yet. Thank you. And by the way, Karen, thank you for putting these slides in at the very last minute. I sent you all some slides because I want to talk about alternative ways to address counterfeiting. And I realized as I was preparing last night that you may not have the language in front of you like I did. So bear with me on those slides. But as I was mentioning, many organizations are trying to attack this problem really using the brand name or intellectual property violations and so forth. I actually think that the CPSC provides an alternative approach or a complementary approach because we have in our statute and regulations areas where I personally think we can use as tools to combat counterfeits. It's, in my opinion, it's a different, I think it's a little bit of a creative way to address counterfeits coming into the U.S. And I want to propose today some ideas on how we together can use CPSC and its statutory obligations as an additional tool in the fight against counterfeits. Now, keep in mind why I'm addressing it as an alternate approach. CPSC does not have express jurisdiction over any product that's a counterfeit, as that term is defined in intellectual property law. We don't have direct jurisdiction over fraud or the financial impact on industry or consumers. And technically, the CPSC has no real jurisdiction over the sale of counterfeits, and I'll come back to that point a little later. We also don't have a way to measure whether a product is counterfeit, as we understand this term generally, and certainly counterfeit, fake, knockoff, as that term is particularly defined under IP and trademark law. But what we do have is jurisdiction over consumer goods and their potential to cause an unreasonable risk of injury or harm. And that is where the CPSC comes in. And that is where the CPSC could be used as an additional tool to combat some of this stuff. I mean, regardless of what intellectual property right a counterfeit violates, counterfeits are a proven pool. Certainly, they are a highly probable source of non-compliant or subpar products and practices that violate federal safety regulations, rules, and laws. I mean, if a producer or a seller is violating intellectual property rights, for example, it's not a big leap that they are also not following the safety rules and would be submitting fake certificates or using counterfeit UL or other labeling requirements, etc. So that's the area that I want to focus on. In almost every report that I've read so far that talks about counterfeits, the reports in different organizations do recognize the health and safety issue that is evident with counterfeit products. I mean, the DHS report that came out at the beginning of the year concluded that health and safety issues flow directly from these illegitimate consumer products. They do pose a risk to health and safety. They threaten, in some instances, national security, not the CPSC's issue, and public safety when introduced into supply chains. That is the CPSC. Industry stakeholders concerned with intellectual property rights also note a correlation between violations of property rights and consumer product safety. And so with that as a background, let me give you a crash course in the CPSC statute, or the CPSA and the CPSIA. So bear with me. I want you to see why this is necessary. And I'm hoping that as we walk through these together, the ideas will start to pop into your head like they have popped into mine. So I'm going to give this caveat. I typed these myself. I'm not a good secretary. So I apologize if there are typos. And also, I want you to know that these are not, it's as word for word as I could get them. There could be some paraphrasing. So I do encourage you to look these sections up. But let's start with Section 12 under the CPSIA. So let's go to that slide. Imminent hazards. Now, the Commission has power to file in the U.S. District Court an action against, now these are, I try to highlight some of the buzzwords here, against imminently hazardous consumer products for seizure, and or we can file an action against a person who is a manufacturer, distributor, or retailer of such an imminent hazardous product, or both. That's just one of the areas that we can certainly use under our statute, because if a counterfeit product is also imminently hazardous, and we can talk about that definition, this statute gets clicked right into place. And I can tell you that a counterfeit charger, for example, that is stamped with Apple and is stamped with a UL counterfeit sticker is an imminent hazard, especially if you're going to plug it in, it doesn't comply with safety standards, and it blows up. So that is one tool that we can use. Let's look at Section 16, inspections and record keeping. Okay. So the commission officers with certain conditions, and I love this because I don't know if you guys can see me, I have one of these fancy schmancy badges. I never knew what I could do with it. This is what I can do with it. And there are a lot of us here that can actually use the investigative power that we have. So commission officers can conduct inspections. This is why this is important. We are authorized to enter, look at this language, any factory, warehouse, or establishment where consumer products are manufactured or held in connection with distribution and commerce. It's pretty broad. Any firewall conformity bodies accredited, put that aside for a second, or any conveyance being used to transport consumer products in connection with distribution and commerce. Conveyance. That pretty much means anything. U.S. Post Office, this is what I would argue, the holding facilities, the customs facilities, which also address UPS, FedEx. I mean, this is a pretty big deal. So we can enter and then we can inspect all of these places. And then I love this language, and establishment where such products are manufactured.
Our apologies, everyone. It looks like we've lost the audio for Commissioner Baiocco. Just hold on one second. Commissioner, are you able to reestablish your audio? It looks like she is attempting that. It might be where you need to exit and re-enter, so our apologies. While we are waiting for the commissioner to do that, a great thanks to all of our attendees who've come in today. Remember to use the Q&A function to submit your questions. Looks like we've got one or two so far, and certainly I have one as well, so we're hoping that Commissioner Baiocco is able to rejoin us. Well, with all online events, we do have technical issues, so our apologies. Perhaps the best step while the commissioner is trying to call back in is if we can ask Kim Giannopoulos perhaps to jump. Wait, is it Dana? Can we hear you? Nope. So if we can ask if Kim would jump to her presentation in the interim, that way we can move forward and we can certainly go back to the commissioner's presentation at a later point.
I'm happy to do whatever makes sense.
Well, thank you so much for your flexibility. Very much appreciated.
Not sure if I'm back or not.
Oh, hi,
Oh.
Commissioner Baiocco, you are back. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Uh-oh, it's coming in and out, I think.
I don't know if you guys can hear me. Karen, can you wave at me if you can hear me? Okay, great. I hate this technology. I hate virtual. I cannot wait to get in person. It hasn't worked for me yet, so I apologize. But let's look at, so again, we have authority to do inspections and to look at record keeping. How many times have you heard that we can't identify the third-party sellers or the parties that are actually manufacturing these counterfeits? This gives the commission, this section gives the commission the ability to condition the sale or offering for sale. So I mentioned I would come back to the jurisdiction of offering for sale, or any type of product distributed in commerce that doesn't meet the recording or record-keeping authority. That's important. Let's go to section 15B. Everybody loves 15B, right? Every manufacturer of a consumer product has to report, let the commission know if you have evidence or information that reasonably concludes or leads you to the conclusion that it fails to comply with an applicable consumer product safety rule. We all know this one. That's important. Fails to comply with any rule, frankly. It could contain a defect, create a substantial product hazard. Any of these things, you have an obligation to report. And the commission, if this happens and we determine that the product is in fact defective or doesn't meet a safety compliance standard, we can order distribution to be ceased. We can require the person distributing the bad product, if you will, to give notice to every person that they know the product went to. So I want you to think about that. So when we have these third-party sellers saying we don't know who they went to, well, under this statute, you better find out. And let's look at, this one's my favorite, section 17. CPSC has an obligation to stop or refuse admission into the customs territory of any products coming into the United States if, we see this language again. Let's go to the next slide, Karen. We see this language again. If the consumer product fails to comply with an applicable consumer safety rule. See the theme here? If it's not accompanied by a certificate, if it's not properly labeled, if it's been determined to be an imminently hazardous product in a proceeding brought under Section 12, where I started, and if the product has a substantial product hazard and is identified under your Section 15B requirements, we can stop it. And if a product was manufactured by a person who the commission has informed, Secretary Mnuchin, I always laugh at that, has a violation of, guess what, record keeping and inspection requirements, we can actually destroy those products. We can destroy them. So this is a really busy slide that I want you, go to the next one, that I want you to look at a little later on. But here are all the tools that we can use under the CPSA and the CPSIA to actually help combat counterfeits. So if you can't prove that it's a violation of an IP right, if you can show that it's an imminently hazardous product, we can bring an action against them. If it fails to comply with a product safety rule or any other rule or regulation, you need to tell us. And when you tell us, guess what? Under Section 17, we can stop it at the ports. And if you fail to meet any of those inspection or recording, record-keeping requirements under the CPSIA, guess what? We can not only stop the product at the ports, but we could condition what you do in the future, offering for sale or manufacturing for sale or putting into distribution and commerce the actual product at issue. So those are pretty powerful sections of the acts. I think that they've been overlooked here for counterfeits. I think that if you really take the language at its face value, you can apply it. It can be used to target. It could be used to stop things that you all know is out there and violating rules. So please let us know. Now, of course, this has a few shortcomings, right? You can see them all. I think that the CPSC should have an entire department, an entire directorate that is geared towards e-commerce and bad, I'm calling them bad products, counterfeits, non-compliant, subpar, don't meet the safety rules. We should be going after this with guns blazing. And so, you know, resources here, we definitely need more resources here. We need the leadership to start recognizing that these are real issues and we have real power instead of sitting here twiddling our thumbs with, you know, the same products we've been looking at for the last 10 years. And this is something that I think the CPSC should be consulted with. Let's talk, let's work together with IP or different organizations that are addressing this. These are really powerful tools that can be used where you don't have to prove any of the trademark or IP requirements. So I am way over my time, but I did want to bring these to your attention because I think there are tons of opportunities here if we could actually organize, because there's way too many people out there doing this and maybe we need to divide and conquer. So I'm happy to talk about this or answer questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I really appreciate it. And some very excellent points regarding current regulation that covers the counterfeit products. And next in our presentation, I'd like to welcome Kimberly Giannopoulos. Ms. Giannopoulos is the Director for International Trade Issues in the International Affairs and Trade team at the Government Accountability Office. Her portfolio includes a wide variety of trade-related issues, including intellectual property rights, sanctions, export controls, and government procurement. Recently, she and her team have written reports on trade-based money laundering, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., Customs and Border Protection's trade enforcement activities, and conflict minerals. Kimberly, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Karen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, and to the TICC Council for inviting me to speak here today. I welcome everyone who's joined us on the call, and hopefully I'll be able to share some information with you on work that we've done in the recent past about intellectual property rights, and then preview just a little bit some work that will be coming out very, very soon. So next slide, please, Karen. Thank you. So welcome, everybody. As Karen mentioned, I'm a director in our International Affairs and Trade team, and my portfolio covers a wide variety of things in the international trade area, including intellectual property rights. But first of all, some of you may be asking, what is GAO? Is it GSA? Do we manage government building? No, we're something different. We work for the legislative branch. Next slide, please, Karen. So just to give you a quick overview of who we are and what we do. We are a legislative branch agency, and we work directly for the U.S. Congress. We're divided into a variety of mission teams. Basically, where the U.S. dollar goes, we go. We provide oversight for the U.S. Congress on a wide variety of issues, everything from defense to healthcare to physical infrastructure. Our work comes in three main ways. First of all, we can be mandated to do work, which means that a mandate may be written into law or into a committee or conference report asking us to do something on a particular issue related to federal government expenditures. We can be requested to do something by any member or members of Congress, which is where this work came from, or anyone generally on a committee of jurisdiction may ask us to do work in a particular area. Or finally, a very small percentage of our work is done at the request of the Comptroller General, the head of our agency, who is appointed for a 15-year term. This work is typically very broad-based and covers things like our high-risk series or expenditures on the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts. Almost all of our reports are publicly available on our website, including the one I'm going to refer to today. Our website is www.gao.gov, and you can just search for a particular report or go into our individual issue areas and look at the reports in that particular area and see what interests you. So the work that we're going to talk about here today is on counterfeits. I won't read to you what's on the slide, but we do a variety of different things related to counterfeits as well. So the report that I'm going to talk about is listed right there. You can Google, it's faster probably if you Google the report number to find that report. It was issued a couple of years ago and available online. We have a follow-on report, which I'm going to talk about in just a few moments. That's hopefully going to be coming out by the end of this month. I had been hoping to be able to talk to you all about it here today. We did issue it to our requesters a few days ago, but they've decided that they want to put a hold on it, which they have the legislative right to do. So it'll be issued sometime before the end of this month. Our requesters, as I just mentioned, are the Senate Finance Committee, specifically the chair, Senator Grassley. But we do work for a variety of committees across the federal government and across the Congress. Next slide, please. So counterfeit goods, the variety of goods, as was mentioned just a few moments ago by the commissioner, the variety of products being counterfeited has increased dramatically. It occurs in just about every industry and across a broad range of subjects. According to the Customs and Border Protection officials that we talked to when we did this work, anything and everything is being counterfeited. In the past, you've typically seen things on perhaps Coach purses or luxury items, pharmaceuticals, maybe designer shoes. Now it's everything from cups to chargers, as was mentioned a few moments ago, to just about anything that you might purchase off of a website like Amazon. Major seizure operations in the past few years have resulted in the confiscation of a variety of things such as automotive parts, consumer electronics, sports-related merchandise, and semiconductor devices. Where do many of these sales take place? Well, it used to be that they would take place on secondary markets like flea markets or sidewalk vendors. If you walk down the street in DC and find a sidewalk vendor selling you Coach purses, you're probably not going to expect to get the real thing. But now all we have to do is log into our Amazon Prime account or to eBay or to a variety of different websites and find these types of things. Counterfeiters exploit these third-party online marketplaces to gain an appearance of legitimacy to consumers. If they take a photo that is listed on a manufacturer's website and put that on their eBay listing, you think you're getting the real thing because you're looking at the real thing. But when it arrives in your mailbox, you realize, perhaps you realize, that it's not the real thing. Next slide, please. So in our report that we issued a couple of years ago in 2018, we had a variety of things that we looked at. Specifically, our first objective focused on the purchase of counterfeit goods online. We went on to 5 different platforms and purchased a variety of goods. We had some criteria for the goods that we were purchasing. We wanted to look for things that you or I, as a typical consumer, might look for if we were purchasing a particular item. So, you know, these websites that we went to had to receive a rating of B or better from the Better Business Bureau. From the top 50 consumer shopping websites, we chose those that offered platforms for third-party sales, sold a variety of trademarked products to the public, and offered a minimum of 2 items from at least 2 different third-party sellers. We also looked for prices that were within range of what we would expect to pay for the actual and authentic products that we were looking for. As you can see here on the table, which is also in our report, 20 out of the 47 items that we purchased were deemed counterfeit. And how did we determine that? Well, we didn't determine that because we're not the experts. We went back to the rights holders and asked them to help us determine whether the items we purchased were legitimate and authentic or not. And they came back to us and confirmed whether it was or was not. Interestingly, you know, sometimes folks ask me what was a surprise. So one of the things that I found to be a surprise in looking at this table was that every single one of the Air Jordans that we purchased, all 15 of them were authentic across a variety of different platforms. However, the Urban Decay cosmetics that we purchased, all 13 were counterfeit, all of them. Now, this is not generalizable, of course, but it's interesting that what you think you might find is not always what you're going to find. I can talk more about the methodology for that if you'd like later in the questions and answers period, or you can look in our report. Next slide, please. So we had some examples in our report of discrepancies between the counterfeit and authentic goods. Some are easier to identify than others. So if you look at the picture that's in the top left corner of this slide, you'll see that there are 2 misspellings in the bottom of the Yeti mug that we purchased. So that might be something, but the print was very small and it's on the bottom of the product. Not everybody is going to turn over the product and look at that to see if they've got a legitimate product. The UL listing, the commissioner mentioned that a few moments ago. If you look at the left side here on the slide, that's a legitimate UL listing. On the right side, you'll see that the U and the L are somewhat separated, and you know, that's a counterfeit marking, as well as the word listed is missing, which is not something that the typical member of the public would know to look for. And then finally, on the right here, the Urban Decay makeup, you can see that the packaging is slightly different, but the tube itself looks very similar. The Urban Decay folks told us that the one on the right is counterfeit. That's the one that we purchased. And it's, unless you have them next to each other, it's very difficult to tell the difference. Next slide, please. So just a couple other things in this particular report that I want to go over with you. As was mentioned a moment ago, the risks associated with counterfeit goods are beyond IPR infringement. A UL investigation of counterfeit iPhone adapters found a 99% failure rate and 400 counterfeit adapters, and 12 of the adapters posed a risk of lethal electrocution to the user. Other things that could challenge health and safety of the consumers, there could be a higher than approved concentration of dangerous chemicals such as lead. According to ICE, folks there that we talked to, they seized counterfeit cosmetics that they found hazardous substances including cyanide, arsenic, mercury, lead, urine, and rat droppings. Think about that the next time you put makeup on your face. Not a great feeling. What recommendations did we make in the report? Well, let me talk to you a little bit about some of the other conclusions that we reached and then introduce you to the recommendations. So as was mentioned, counterfeit goods provide a very lucrative market for criminal activity and can pose serious risks to consumers. The growth in e-commerce has changed the way counterfeiters interact with consumers, and the accompanying increase in the volume and sophistication of counterfeit goods has created challenges for both CBP and ICE enforcement. While both agencies have undertaken activities to enhance IPR enforcement and have collected some performance data on their activities, CBP has conducted a very limited evaluation of its efforts. Managing the huge volume of both legitimate and counterfeit goods entering the country requires an efficient use of resources. Without better information on the effectiveness of its activities, CBP may not be able to focus its limited resources on the most efficient or effective uses. Additionally, without collecting and disseminating effective practices resulting from some port-led initiatives, CBP may be missing an opportunity to either scale up or improve its existing efforts. And then secondly, with the growth of e-commerce, the private sector, including many of you, rights holders and e-commerce websites, can play a very important role in helping to enforce IPR and protect consumers. Information shared by CBP plays a very important role in facilitating private sector enforcement. But CBP has not determined what, if any, additional information would be beneficial to share with private sector entities. And until it completes an assessment of this information sharing, CBP will not know whether sharing the information requires regulatory or legal challenges. So because of those findings, we recommended two things. One, that CBP take steps to evaluate the effectiveness of its efforts, and then secondly, to assess what additional information it should share with the private sector and take action to do that. They concurred with both of those recommendations, and the current status, in a nutshell, in September of 2018, they worked to develop priorities and metrics and began efforts to improve their tracking. And then in December of 2018, they identified a need to establish information sharing for e-commerce. We consider both of these recommendations still open as they have not completely fulfilled their requirements as mentioned in our recommendations. Next slide, please. So in our forthcoming report, hopefully within the next few weeks, you'll see that we focused more on relevant European Union and US processes to combat counterfeit goods in small packages, i.e. those that go directly to consumers for the most part. We're also going to report on challenges that we found in this area, both on the EU side and the US side, and some of the steps that have been taken by CBP in the recent past to address these challenges. As I mentioned our website before, it's right there on the slide, and you'll be able to download that report for free, GAO-20-692, by the end of October. And my next slide is just a closing slide. So I thank you very much for your time, and Karen, back to you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. A very informative presentation, and certainly we've gotten a few questions so far. Please continue to submit your questions in the Q&A section. We'll be covering them at the end of the presentation. Completing our panel today, we extend our warm welcome to Jill Notini. Jill Notini is AHAM's Vice President, Communications and Marketing, and has been with AHAM since 1999. In her role, she has responsibility for member communications, media, and consumer outreach, and AHAM's shipment data programs and marketing research. She also oversees membership recruitment efforts. In addition, she has executed consumer safety education and category promotion programs to raise awareness of safety issues and promote key benefits of home appliances. welcome Jill. Oh, Jill, you are muted.
Okay, thanks so much, Karen. Thanks for letting me know that. And thanks so much to the TICC Council for inviting AHAM to be part of this esteemed panel. I was really impressed by both of the other panelists' presentations and their energy around this issue. We certainly, as an association, we're brought into this. It's not a new issue, but we were brought into this as a more active issue for our association in 2016 when we were first alerted by our members that they were seeing increases in consumer complaints and claims around kitchens that were actually flooding because of water filters that were not properly seated in the refrigerators. And when we looked into this problem more and the manufacturers were requesting, to look at the actual filters, they were discovering that these products were actually counterfeit. So Karen, you can start the slide presentation, and I'm going to talk to the group today about, about how our effort came to be. And about this, maybe you would think kind of an odd category of counterfeit products, but as both the commissioner and Kim pointed out, we really are seeing counterfeits across every product category, even the most unlikely ones. Karen, you can advance. Thanks. So this is just to show you, this is a category that was recognized. There's toothpaste, contact lenses, water filters, wine. It's not just expensive designer clothes, watches, or baseball caps. Counterfeiters will counterfeit and take advantage of any category. And it's not just IP claims. We're looking at true health and safety issues. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about today and why this is so important. Karen, you can advance. Thanks. So here's just a quick demonstration. And this is for all of you. I wish we had audio for our audience, but you can take a look here at the two counterfeit filters that are in this slide and take a look at the differences. What I'm going to ask you to look at are the graphics. You can see that the filter on the left has some water splash that is much clearer to see. The one on the right is a little bit more blurred. You can't quite tell what that is. You can also see that there's a pretty big difference in the plastics. They appear to be the same size, the same shape. They both have the same sticker on the top, but the water filter on the right is actually a brighter, more vibrant plastic. It might even look nicer to some consumers who would be purchasing this. But in fact, the counterfeit filter is on the right. So the one that has the shinier plastic, that is the one that is not a genuine filter. You can see there that the graphics are bleeding together a bit, and it's also missing some of the text that you would find on the genuine filter. When you turn these filters around, you can actually see that there are also counterfeit, not just the logos and the graphics, but there are also counterfeit certification labels on these products as well. Thanks, Karen. So we know that the real problem here is that these counterfeit and what I'll call deceptively labeled water filters, they're flooding the markets, and predominantly they are flooding the online markets every day. We know that these numbers are well into the millions of filters that are sold online, and that many of them are counterfeit products. The real dangers with these products is that they fail to meet safety and structural standards, and they also fail to meet the various standards that have been set related to not just the safety, but the aesthetics, the taste of the water, and what they're claiming to actually filter out. People are purchasing these. They really think that they are doing the right thing for their family. That's what's really tough about this. We know that water quality is a huge issue in this country, and particularly in some areas of the country. We just got over, the Flint, Michigan situation. Every time there's a weather event, you have possible water issues. So people really are trying to do the right thing. They are spending a good bit of money to buy filters online. Sometimes they're cheaper, but not all the time. That's not always an indicator of a counterfeit product. Karen? Advance, thanks. So we're really taking our issue on the road. We set up a program to make consumers more aware. We call it the Filter It Out program. And we didn't just stop there with letting people know about it. We wanted to also go to the halls of Congress, walk into every agency, and really tell the story of this problem. Because again, it is not just an IP problem. That alone would be enough to take action on this category of counterfeit products. But when we did the testing and the research on this category of filters, we realized that there were very serious health and safety issues related to counterfeit water filters. When you saw that shiny plastic in a couple slides ago, that shiny plastic is not a food grade quality plastic. And therefore it's contacting water. It's contacting water that you're supposed to drink. And so that is adding things into the water that can be dangerous. We actually worked with the Water Quality Association and the Water Quality Research Foundation, who they were good enough to provide a grant for research and testing on counterfeit water filters. We also partnered with NSF and with IAPMO, who are they're all leaders in this area and obviously are the ones that are setting the standards for drinking water systems, and then doing the testing related to those NSF standards. So our partners took the filters that we sourced online and tested all the filters, and overwhelmingly all filters failed to remove the contaminants from the water and failed the basic testing. We knew, and we went into the testing with a great hunch that these filters were going to fail a lot of the basic tests. But what we didn't know in the testing was that when we did one of the specific tests that we ran, we put in pure clean water into the filters and then tested a sample on the other side to look at what came out of the filters. And what came out it was shocking, and it was new information to us. And it was that these filters, what we found was more than 10 different chemicals above the EPA allowable limits that are known cancer-causing toxic chemicals that were actually leaching into the water from the filter itself. So it was not in the water at the start, but it was coming into the water at the end. So that was something that really showed us that this is not just sort of a nuisance kind of problem. This is not IP alone. This is truly a very serious chronic health and safety issue for consumers that we want to tackle. It also, of course, can lead to, as I mentioned, damage to the appliance in the kitchen when you have an event where these filters can actually burst. So overall, we know that they're also not made with the same technology as authentic as genuine products, and that's another problem there. Our study is available on our website, which is called filteritout.org. It's under the See the Proof page. If anyone wants a copy of that study, there's a PDF you can download of all of the results and the methodology used. Karen? So our industry, the home appliance industry, we really want to take this issue very seriously. People are very connected to their appliances. We just saw Kim sitting in front of her refrigerator for her presentation, and that's really where we all are these days. We are using our appliances more and more, where we've already known that they are the center of the home, that we're very connected and reliant on the brands that are in our home, and our manufacturers take that trust very seriously. So that's when they came to us, we worked with our 17 different member company brands to start a public education and awareness campaign called Filter It Out. And again, we're very grateful to our partners in this. We know that there's a lot of groups that are trying to support efforts around counterfeit products, and specifically around filters, which are a known area for counterfeits. We're very grateful to NSF, Water Quality Association, and IATMO. The other thing I will note is that UL has also taken quite a stance in this area. We are participating with UL in their Buy Real, Be Safe campaign in November to help further the messaging on this issue and on other counterfeits. Karen? Great. So here's just a little slide of some of the brands. Again, these are all the ones that are familiar to you in your home, and they're all the ones that care very much about this issue. Karen, you can advance. Thanks. So really, you know, the main foundation of our program, it's a multi-leg stool. But I wanted to let you all know if anyone has an interest in helping to get the word out, or really looking at our program maybe as a model program, in that we've received a lot of really good feedback on what we've been able to do, because again, not only did we set up the public education components, but we also did the testing. And I think that's where you come in. That's where all the certification bodies and the testing organizations come into play. We were able to really put teeth into our message by showing that we had done the testing of these counterfeit products and to show the proof. So certainly it's a very important role for many of the organizations that are on the line now to know that you do have the power, you know, to really make these campaigns and these messages much stronger by providing the data and testing results. All of that information is found on our website, which highlights the importance of selecting a filter that performs as expected. It explains the standards, because we find that people who are shopping for you know, a category that takes a little bit of work to learn about it, they want to know about the standards. There are choices out there. And then what we try to do is to connect them with a reliable source, a trusted source to purchase a product. So we try to make it very easy to educate and then to locate a manufacturer that can provide a genuine filter. Karen? Okay, here's just a couple little examples of our content. I think this is all very relatable, probably to everyone on the line. We're all, again, tapping into our products more often than ever these days. Karen, you can advance. Thanks. And again, there's a lot of videos we've done. That's okay. You can advance, Karen. We've done quite a few videos actually on this topic. We use social media. You can see here one of our tweets in the corner there is actually Commissioner Bayako retweeted us, and really she deserves a very warm shout out for all of the incredible energy that she has put into this area of counterfeit products. It truly is unmatched, and it is a very welcome response by the commissioner on this issue. So you can see that there are manufacturers, there are media outlets, we have government, we have water quality groups. There are plenty of people that that want to help advance the message, and there's still a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done. Karen? Thanks. So we really do believe that, again, there's been a good amount of effort. We are very happy by the response we've seen. We've seen Congress, we've seen the administration last year put out an executive order and a request for more information on counterfeits and a request for organizations to provide feedback to the government on what we feel as industry groups can be done to help make the enforcement process more efficient. And so as an organization, AHAM was able to comment on this because of our experience in this category. We really want to see that the government would get involved in blocking importation of counterfeit filters. It's a very important category to block them, to find them when they do come in. We obviously understand that this is a needle in the haystack kind of situation in terms of resources. But this is very important that the government does do more search, more seizure of these products, and really increases its funding for inspections at the ports. We're also seeing a lot of these filters come in just by direct mail. So that is another issue. We've even found counterfeit filters come in bulk that are non-branded. So they actually are able to come in, and then the labels are shipped separately. So the counterfeiters are very clever, very sneaky, and we need to stay ahead of them. We want to see that there is enforcement against counterfeiters. And again, all great appreciation to the CPSC commissioner for her thinking outside the box on how we can attack counterfeit through CPSC action. We also hope really through this presentation today, it's really just a call to anyone out there that has the ability to reach consumers. We all have a role in understanding this. It's not one group's issue. It's all of our issue to come together to help educate consumers, to make them aware that it's not just Versace handbags and Major League Baseball caps that get counterfeit, but it's even these mundane categories that have such a tremendous impact. Karen, you can advance. We actually are part of a fairly new coalition. I would encourage all of you to visit the buysafeamerica.org website, where you can see the work of that coalition. It's a tremendous number of groups and influence in that coalition that are all really working to drive some action. There's been a lot of media about this group, and there's also been a lot of action on the Hill in the drafting and the formation of the Inform Consumer Act, which is a piece of legislation that really does attempt to create some kind of recourse, not only for companies, but also for consumers in requiring online sellers to provide more information and for a way to know more about an online seller and to have a recourse if there is a counterfeit product sold. So there's also the Shop Safe Act, which is another act that really is driving toward a safer online marketplace and ridding these online marketplaces of bad actors. Both pieces of legislation are very good. AHAM supports this legislation, but they're also just, really just chips off of an iceberg in terms of really tackling this entire problem. So again, we're very supportive of this piece of effort here around legislation that's pending, of the coalition's work. It's all moving in a very good direction. We just really need to see everyone come together, get behind it through all of these different mechanisms, whether it's increased funding for the ports, more enforcement action, more energy and work at the agencies that have jurisdiction over these products. But overall, our work continues, and we really are just grateful for forums and opportunities such as this to be able to talk about the issue. So thank you, Karen. That wraps up my presentation. If anyone has any follow-ups, I'm happy to take them.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. I mean, some very important points, and we'll all be checking out your research and report on the water filters on the AHAM website. Certainly interesting, and your comment regarding a needle in the haystack is very relevant because that's what we hear from others in the community. Is it's difficult enough to identify when a product is counterfeit. Most of the times, it's being stopped at the border, but also it's making it to consumers in single shipment packages. And what do those consumers do when they receive that product? A bit scary to know that the water filters meant to make the water cleaner are actually, in fact, making them worse than they were before. So an important note that this affects all of the industries, and that is a great example of how counterfeits actually make things less safe for everyone. Commissioner Bayaka, you commented in your notes that there are elements of response that the CPSC can provide. And I know that they are pretty active on the border, helping to identify products coming in. I'm curious, when CPSC does identify a product at the port that it suspects is a counterfeit product, what happens next? Does CPSC hand it off? Does it work with another agency? What is that process? She might have stepped away. No worries at all. Another question, and we'll go back to Commissioner Bayaka when she has returned, is Kimberly, admittedly, I'm very interested in this upcoming
No, I'm here.
Oh, there she is.
Sorry, I was muted. I tell you, this technology, it's a really good question. We are required by statute to work side by side with CBP, and CBP is wonderful to work with. They're very helpful to us. What depends on what product that we stop and what the issue is. Usually we seize, refuse admission. There's some destroy. It just depends on the scenario. But it's really important here to note that our data that we get in is based on CBP data. And the center in Washington, D.C. called TICC, which is the central location that all federal agencies can tap in, recently has denied access to almost all federal agencies because of the claim that there is terrorist information in there, and we don't have that clearance. I find that remarkable, and there is some consternation about this, as you can imagine. This is a recent happening because our hands are tied now. We can't even access the information that we need, and we all know that there are terrorist organizations that fund a lot of these counterfeit situations, or vice versa, and we've had access to it for a long time. So I'm not sure whether this is a political issue, how this came down, but we're in the process of trying to get through this because it's a really bad situation if we don't have any ability to information share, not only with the CBP, but also with the other federal agencies that are similarly participating. The other issue that you need to be aware of in this regard is our structure, statutorily and physically, is set up to look at big shipments at the ports. We all know these are little shipments coming into our house. And so we need some changes to allow us to get to those places, boots on the ground, have some ability to work with this. I'm on a committee that's federal agency-wide, and I do know that the U.S. Postal Service is involved now, and there are steps moving forward. But there's a lot to be done, and I kind of I've been typing it out, even though if you guys are getting this. These last two acts, while I support them, I gave comments, and I told them exactly what they needed to say for us to be able to do what they're suggesting we do, and they were ignored. So I don't know how effective they're going to be. I mean, one of them actually has us doing a report on our efforts before the amount of time passes for us to put our efforts into place. We're going to spend more time giving reports on nothing than actually doing the work. So we need some reasonableness, we need some brain power here, and we need some practical applications and practical results. The way we're doing it here is just sort of in the vacuum, in the floating out there.
Well, excellent. Thank you for that. I think that a lot of food for thought, and especially an emphasis that we all need to work together to find solutions that are effective. So a good note from Commissioner Bayako, and thank you for that. In regards to Kimberly, just to finish my thought, maybe you could speak, if you can, a little bit more about the upcoming GAO report. Very interested in that, and certainly any additional insight and feedback on how we can measure or identify the effect of counterfeit products on consumers and industry is so important.
Yes, thanks for the question, Karen. So I can't talk a whole lot about the findings in our upcoming report, but let me say that we've got 3 main objectives that we're covering in that product. So in the first product that I talked about here today, it was very much a U.S. consumer focus. And actually in the last page of that report, we have an appendix which lists about 10 or so suggestions for consumers to consider whether or not they're getting a counterfeit good and how to protect themselves from getting counterfeit goods. And I recommend anybody to take a look at that if they're interested. But the 3 main objectives in our upcoming report that will be coming out in a few weeks. First of all, we looked at how selected elements of the European Union and U.S. approaches to counterfeit goods in small packages compare. It's certainly a major consideration, as we've talked about here today, of the individual packages that are coming to my house and to your house from these various platforms. So how does the EU handle it, and how does the US handle it, and what are the differences there? The second objective that we cover in the upcoming report, or what are some of the common challenges that both the US and the EU customs officials report in combating the flow of counterfeit goods in small packages. Before COVID-19, we were able to travel to the EU to a number of different countries and talk with customs officials in those countries, as well as folks at the European Commission, to talk about what they do more broadly, as well as what they do in individual countries like Germany and France and others. And then finally, our third objective is to what extent has CBP taken steps to address challenges posed by these counterfeit goods in small packages. We worked extensively with CBP to determine what it is that they're trying to do currently to address these issues. And we sneak preview, we will have at least one recommendation in our upcoming report of how they can improve that. Because GAO's link to all of this really isn't what can we as individuals do, but more what can the U.S. government do, because we have to report back to the U.S. Congress. I hope that answers your question about our upcoming report.
Yes, and we can't wait to take a look. So looking forward to that announcement, and certainly all of our TICC members will make sure that you're notified. But all those attending today, keep track of the GAO website for that announcement. We'll all get excited when we see that report introduced. And I see that we are now over time, so my apologies to our attendees that may have submitted questions thus far. Certainly reach out to our presenters directly. I believe Jill included a few websites for your consideration to get involved with AHAM's efforts. The TICC Council is also a member of the coalition, and we'll be looking at Commissioner Beaco's thoughts and comments on that legislation. Next week, stay tuned for CBD. Customs and Border Protection. We'll be talking about their efforts. In closing, thank you to each of our panelists for joining us today. The cost that online fraud and the sale of counterfeit goods has and will have on industry, consumers, government, and other stakeholders is a critical element of the discussion, and the information you've provided has been essential in better understanding the breadth of this issue. For those attending, please reach out to the TICC Council and also share your thoughts online using the Fighting Online Fakes hashtag, and lend your voice and thoughts to this important issue. Tune in next week for our final panel in a series entitled Efforts to Combat Fraud and Counterfeiting in the United States. Panels for the third and final panel include Shira Perlmutter, Chief Policy Officer and Director for International Affairs at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, Elena Van Horn, Intellectual Property Rights Branch Chief at the Customs and Border Protection, Jeff Hardy, Director General at TICC, and Brian Winehouse, Unit Chief of the Homeland Security Investigations Intelligence Property Rights Unit. In this panel, we will be exploring the actions underway at agencies within industry and elsewhere, and engaging in a discussion on next steps for combating the issues of online fraud and the sale of counterfeit goods. Great topic to align with the GAO report. Sounds like what we'll learn will then be enhanced by their recommendations. And it is not too late for you to attend. Please feel free to share this important series of events with your fellow colleagues and stakeholders. Registration will remain open throughout the 3-part virtual panel series, and those unable to attend can review the recordings online on the TICC Council website. So thank you to everyone, our panelists and attendees, and looking forward to seeing you again next week for our third and final panel.